Welcome you back into the Lootpress Sports Lowdown. I'm Lootpress Sports Editor Tyler Jackson, joined today by Lootpress Sports Writer Russ Udy, and we are back for our third episode. We made it 3 episodes in so far.
It's kind of crazy. It's like, you always talk about how football season flies by once it starts, and fall sports kind of all fall in line to that. And yeah, here we are, week 3. So
it's funny because it feels like football season now today.
Right.
We've had the cooler weather the last couple of nights.
Last couple of nights have been nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a bit different from the heat wave that we had.
Yeah.
But we have a great show in store for you. We're going to recap the action from week 2, talk a little volleyball and soccer, and talk about week 3 of prep football season. And as always, our player of the week picks will be announced here at the end of the show. We already have that finalized, but we'll go ahead and start with our week 2 recap. We had an interesting slate of games, a couple rivalry games, quite a few statement games. There's a lot to talk about. The one I want to start with is Mingo Central West Side, a double-A showdown. This was one we talked about. This could probably be sort of a game of the week sort of atmosphere. It was going to be the first big statement game for West Side in the Justin Kogar area, and boy, did West Side deliver a 21-20 victory. Hold up Mingo Central.
That's a crazy one. I when I got that information Friday night after we were done doing our stuff and recapping, I'm like, man, I wish I was there, because I bet you that place was a zoo. I mean, it's so exciting down at West Side already, and they really get such good following. And to have a game that dramatic, that place just had to be crazy. And when that buzzer sounded, I can't imagine. I would love to have been there. I'd love to have been there. Yeah,
I think it's going to be a precursor to what I expect to be a really good sports year for West Side. Boys basketball, I've talked about this, but I think that going in, their preseason top 4 team. But it really stood out to me. I talked with some people about how the game kind of transpired. Mingo Central really loaded up to take away the pass in the first half, so West Side decided, okay, we're going to lean on the run a little bit more in the second half, and it paid off. Caden Vance had 30 carries in that game from the quarterback position, 177 yards and a touchdown. It just seemed like and that's really kind of what stands out to me. It's not just that you won the game, but you were down 14-0 at halftime. You scored 21 points there in the second half.
All in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, that's probably about as big of a statement as you can have. And then they have another game with Man this week that I think is going to be a bit challenging for them.
Right.
But to me, that's exactly what you want to see. Your team doesn't give up. And we talked about this when we did our first episode, the preview episode. Their schedule is pretty favorable, and it looks like when you get this one out of the way, at worst, I think they should be an 8-2 team if they stay healthy.
No doubt about it. I mean, they go down 14-0, and it's in the fourth quarter, and it could be one of those games where a team that is kind of still maybe learning to win a little bit, because they're kind of getting this program back on its feet a little bit. Could have folded up, could have made some mistakes, but it almost seemed to energize them, and they made a really incredible comeback. Of course, Caden Vance was just dynamite. I mean, just, when the chips were down, he turned it on, actually made a mistake, with an interception. I don't know the exact details of it, but of course the quarterback's going to get, blamed for that in a way. But, again, that's maturity. He comes back, leads his team back 21 points, and then they hold on there to end, stopping the conversion to seal the game 21-20. So, it's a big win. It's a big win.
Absolutely. And again, this West Side team is going to be one to watch for me. And next week, I'm going to be kind of interested to see how they do against Man. I believe that game is at Man.
Because they're going to have to bounce back a little bit too, emotionally.
Yeah.
And so that could be tricky.
And that's a good point that you bring up. Because there's this thing in the NFL, you look at teams that have big emotional wins, the next week they're sort of a letdown. The one I kind of think about is the Minneapolis Miracle.
Right.
You win there, and then NFC Championship game, you get stomped 38-7 the next week. And that happens quite a bit. It can be hard to come back.
Especially in amateur, football. I mean, you see it a lot in college. Georgia Tech, huge win, Florida State, and then they trip over their feet. It's hard to keep that momentum going after an emotional win, because it had to be off the charts down there. And it's going to be that way all week. A lot of patting on the back and things that coaches a little worry about. Kind of getting those starry eyes a little bit. We'll test the maturity this week, see how Westside does. But I like their chances.
Absolutely. The other week 2 game I want to move on to is Greenbrier East Beckley. That's the game that you were at. And first shutout in the series for Beckley since 1982. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. I mean, it was. I had to admit I was a little shocked. You just don't expect that from a rivalry game, especially Beckley and Greenbrier East. But Coach Surratt had talked, pretty much all through the summer and through the camp. It's like he really said they had a good line. He thought, maybe he had a couple guys that were all-state kind of guys, big-time guys, and man, they just won the war in the trenches big time. And they came right out, took the ball, a 58-yard run by Connor Ray, kind of punches Greenbrier East in the mouth, and they didn't quite recover. I mean, Woodrow wound up going down and scoring 3 times in the first quarter. It's 21-0, and outside of a big defensive stand, that really kind of sealed the game in the second quarter. It was just all Beckley, really.
One thing that really stood out when you talked about it too, Greenbrier East line sort of struggled in that game. Brody Hamrick, quarterback for Greenbrier East, was under attack and just really never had time to get set up. And to me, that's a huge part of what Greenbrier East wants to do with the targets they have, with Suttles, with Burdett. They want to be able to get that passing game going, because sometimes when you can do that, it's harder to defend the passing game a little bit if you're good at it in the high school level. But it just seemed like Greenbrier East was never able to get that going.
They couldn't get that going. They couldn't run the ball. I mean, it really couldn't do anything. I mean, the total offense was below 70 yards for the game. Beckley, had a couple picks again, interceptions. A.J. Thomas got his third. Preston Clary got his first of his high school career, first year playing football, varsity football for Beckley. They just look really, really like a smooth machine. Now they got a big one coming up this week, but it's when you can just line up and kind of basically run it over top of people. That gives you a big advantage. And really, I thought Gage played well. He didn't have to throw it much. Gage Price, the quarterback for Woodrow, didn't have to throw it much, but when he did, he was effective. He threw a couple balls to Landon Jones, and you're talking about a prototypical tight end. That dude's tough, man. He waylaid a couple guys after he catch and run type things. So Beckley's really good. Now going down the schedule's going to get tougher. There's no doubt about it. And so there's going to be some more tests, and I'm interested to see how this game goes this week, because Parkersburg South is really good at putting points on the board. I think they can be scored on. So it's going to be a kind of a thing that can Beckley maintain the ball, hold possessions, and kind of push Parkersburg South to kind of hit those buttons a little quick and maybe cause some more turnovers.
Yeah, and we'll hit more on that game in a little bit. But again, kind of the theme for Beckley so far is just how good their defense is.
Defense is tough, man. I tell you, we kind of talked about it. Just some future games. As sports writers, we can do that kind of stuff. Coaches are going to say they're only going to talk about next week, and I can understand that. But that defense against some offenses down the road, that's going to be an interesting, fun to watch, really.
Yeah, and some of those opponents down the road. Actually, 2 of them I covered when they played Friday night. Yep. Princeton at Bluefield. This actually. I was looking at the bleachers when I was in the press box, and it looked to me a little bit more like a Princeton home game, because there were more fans on the Princeton side, and I was a little bit surprised by that. But by the end of it, it sort of made sense. Princeton won this game 63-7. I was looking it up, and at first I thought it was the most points ever scored against Bluefield, and that honor actually went to a team out of Roanoke, Jefferson, but it's the most points a West Virginia team has ever scored on Bluefield, which says a lot. We're talking about a program that's won 11 state championships. Freddie Simons, defensive guy, been around the block almost 40 years coaching as a head coach, and they just kind of went in there and they lit him up. They moved the ball at will. The only time that Princeton was basically able to be stopped, there was a drop on 4th and goal from the 7 or so.
Right.
It hit Monster right in the hands, and he catches that ball. That's a touchdown. And Barker had an interception, quarterback, and there was also a 4th down where they got a penalty, and they were just, okay, we're going to punt it because it's 4th and 15. But the offense just looked unstoppable. They moved the ball up and down the field pretty much at will. I think their first 2 drives consumed all of like 5 or 6 plays, and they were both 70-yard touchdown drives.
Right.
It just extremely dynamic, and that's kind of what I wanted to see was, how else do kids outside of Markel Lowe and Brad Monster stepped up, and we saw quite a bit of that. Garrett Mays had an interception, a couple big catches. Markel Lowe was really good in the passing game. Wyatt Klein had a 70-yard touchdown. Daniel Jennings, again, had, I think, 3 catches or so for 25 yards or so, and then 3 runs for 60 or 70 yards and a touchdown. Just it clicked really well offensively.
It's kind of scary when you think about it, because, we talked, And you pointed out before, that really Bluefield's defense is pretty good. I mean, I kind of expected this game to be not lopsided, but I felt like Princeton would win by at least 2 or 3 touchdowns without too much trouble. But that score was surprising. It really was. And that's just a lot of credit to Princeton. They have a lot of weapons, a lot of scary weapons. And, going forward, if that defense keeps progressing like it's looks like it's doing, they're going to be really hard to handle. And, we felt like they were legitimate AAA contenders going in. I think they're proving that each week now.
Yeah, and Bluefield was without 2 of their top players, Jamarius Smith and Jeff King in this game. But honestly, I'm not really sure how much that matters. Willis Wilson played the first half, and he was out of pads in the second half. I'm not really sure if he got hurt or not. But Bluefield's still having the same struggles. They scored on a 73-yard run from Wilson in the first quarter, and basically they had 55 yards the rest of the game. Right. It was just a struggle for them to move the ball. They're still not moving the ball through the air very well at all. Still not hitting on anything. And, in their defense, this is going to be the toughest game that they played all year. Like, even if they make an all-in state championship game, they're not going to see a team as good as Princeton. Right. But yeah, things look so bad down there right now. It's hard. And I say, you don't never want to put too much into this first couple of weeks because
right.
Bluefield, they've started 0-2 every year since 2020.
Right.
But they haven't looked this bad when they started 0-2 is the issue.
I think that's the difference in the past was you could see a way out of it. And you could see that, it was just a schedule a lot of times, playing really tough teams. They have really good athletes. But now they still have good athletes, but they're young. I mean, they're still trying to fill those spots. And, just because you throw on the Bluefield uniform doesn't make you a great player. It doesn't make you a great team. And I think that kind of feeling the real sting of graduation and losing so many good athletes, from graduation.
Absolutely. We've talked about it. And Sincere Fields, RJ Harrison, those are kids that they were playing in state championships in basketball, and they were really good football players as well. So.
Yeah, and RJ, he was easy to throw to. I think I could throw to him.
Yeah,
he could jump.
He'd just go up and get it. 6'4" receiver that had legit speed. The one thing that stands out to me for Princeton as a negative, though, and they're probably getting tired of me harping on, are the penalties. I think they got dinged 16 times or so for over 100 yards, which is scary because when you have 500 yards of total offense and you're leaving so many yards out there on penalties, it can be a little bit concerning. The reason I hammer this is because 2 years ago when they played GW in the opening round of the playoffs, they scored it. I think the game was tied 28-28, or GW was up 31-28, and they had the ball and they scored. The touchdown was called back because of an illegal procedure penalty. So then they had to settle for a field goal, and they missed a field goal, and that cost them a playoff game. And that was the year where, in the regular season, they lost to Parkersburg South, I think by 8 points in the last game of the season. Parkersburg South goes on and plays their state runner-up. And, if you're Princeton, you don't commit that penalty, you probably win that game, and you have a chance of making another deep playoff run to set up what you did last year. So I know they're probably getting tired of me harping on the penalties, but I think that's 32 now in 2 games. And to me, that matters because recent history, it has cost you a playoff game.
Yeah. I think even the Oakland Raiders might shake their head at that.
Yeah.
They've made a living off that for years, but it's just, I think you're playing with fire. Mm-hmm. I think you really are. And, I thought you were a good piece today. The top of AAA is tough, brother. I mean, you talk about, Fairmont Senior, Bridgeport. I mean, I think one of the most shocking scores I saw on the weekend was, Bridgeport just shellacking Morgantown.
Yes.
I mean, that was a 49-0 game. It was never close. That was a big surprise. So
Morgantown, I think, is the biggest school in the state. Right? They have 1,800 kids. Like enrollment, it's not like Morgantown. They not had a ton of playoff success, but it's not like they're chumps or anything like that.
And that's always a close game. I mean, for years that game's been played, and it's always close. And I was like, I had to look twice. I was like, I couldn't believe that. You can't commit those kind of penalties in games against Bridgeport, Fairmont Senior, and stuff like that. You just can't. You're going to lose. And really, going forward, you got games like, Oak Hill, Beckley. I mean, some really tough games ahead. You commit those kind of penalties in those games, and that's going to sting you against them. So, Princeton's a really good team. I mean, they're definitely a team we feel like can win this thing, can definitely make the Final Four, the championship game. But you could lose an early round game doing crazy stuff like that and derail a great run to the championship.
And I was looking at its schedules. I think of the four teams that you mentioned, Princeton probably has the easiest schedule, which gives them the path. And that's not saying it's an easy schedule, but it's the easiest of the bunch. Fairmont Senior and Bridgeport, they're going to play on November 1st.
Right.
And that's really late to play that kind of game. I feel like they used to play it like week 3 or week 4 or something like that.
Season,
that's tough to play that kind of game. There's that's going to be for playoff seeding as well.
Right.
Bridgeport's schedule, Fairmont Senior schedule is a little bit lighter up to that point. Bridgeport's, they have Lindsley on the schedule. They have Parkersburg South, and I know Lindsley's not an SSAC team, but they're usually a good program year in and year out.
Very good program.
And I think that gives Princeton the inside track. And Spring Valley, they're going to be a good team, and I think people are going to write them off throughout the duration of the season.
Yep.
But to me, they're just going to play a tough schedule. You're going to play Capital Midland. You're going to play Huntington. Those are very difficult teams to play against. And they lost against Hurricane, a good team that I think could probably make a run to the Class Quad A title game. Right. But if you're Princeton, you have the inside track to host all the way to Honeycutt and get that number 1 or 2 seed, make life a little bit easier for yourself. And if you eliminate those penalties, the one thing I will give them credit for, penalties weren't unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. I thought they were behaved really well. Just a lot of procedure penalties, a lot of holding penalties. But I think that the holding penalty took a touchdown or 2 off the board.
Right.
So they've now lost, I think, 4 or 5 touchdowns this season, 2 penalties, and that's just really tough. So.
And when bringing up Spring Valley, with the kind of schedule they've got, that's a team you may get in the semifinal. I mean, not the quarterfinal rounds. And that back to the same thing we talk about. You cannot have those kind of penalties in that game. So it's not going to be an easy route either way. Even hosting games, you just got to be more disciplined.
Absolutely, and where you end up on the bracket means so much. We talked about last year. I thought Princeton ended up on the favorable side of the bracket. Right. You didn't get the Martinsburg or Huntington side of the bracket. You got the more manageable Bridgeport side of the bracket. You got the Parkersburg side of the bracket. Yep. I think that we talked about that a lot. Where really so much of it matters about where you ended up at, and Princeton got that. You want to give yourself as much of a favorable route as possible. Exactly. And you bring up a good point. I would like to say that those 4 teams or so will probably be the ones playing on Black Friday or the day afterwards. But it's so hard to predict because what if Spring Valley ends up as like a 10 seed or something like that? They could end up knocking one of those teams off there.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what's hard. Sometimes you have to play multiple championship games just to get to the championship game. Mm-hmm. Multiple championship type games. And we feel like Spring Valley is one of the top 4 in the state. You definitely don't want to catch them in the quarterfinals. That's going to be rough.
Absolutely. And if you do catch them, you want to catch them at Honeycutt.
That's right.
Don't make things as difficult.
Huntington, that's for sure.
Absolutely not. They've done that 3 years ago, and obviously different teams, but it's very tough. When you're on the turf as opposed to the slop down at Spring Valley, as it can often turn into. I've seen the field conditions there in the playoffs at times. Make things.
And we've talked about it. We typically, when we have dry summers like this, it does catch up with us eventually. And once October, November roll around, it could get wet, could get mucky, and you definitely want to be on your home turf.
Absolutely. Another Week 2 game we want to talk about: Shady Spring, James Monroe. We talked about it last week. Shady is not in a position to where it can lose games. I think that really to be in the playoffs, they probably have to be 8-2 with the schedule that.
I think it's a minimum.
Yeah, minimum. Yeah. With the schedule, there's just not going to be a lot of points. Only one AAA team, and it didn't look good for them in the first half. I think they were down 13-0 at halftime down at Lynn's side. But the defense really carried it. And Cal Colaserte, who did not play in that game, started quarterback. Miles Clark stepped in for him. Completed 50% of his passes, I think, for a little bit over 100 yards, 130 yards. Didn't turn the ball over through the air, threw an interception. The defense, Shady came away with 3 interceptions. They intercepted Ryan Mann twice, Leighton Dowdy. They got him once. To me, I thought that was probably mentally a good showing for Shady. You're down, you're able to come back without your starting quarterback and do that. And you did it defensively. Nathan Easley had 2 of those interceptions. To me, that's probably moving in the right direction for Shady. If you're James Monroe, it kind of feels like you got a lot of problems that you need to figure out. And I think it kind of starts with what you want to do at quarterback. And I know that they feel like both kids kind of do things well, do different things well, but it's tough. I was doing statistics this weekend, and Ryan Mann now has 4 interceptions, and probably first time playing quarterback in varsity action. But it's tough. You kind of need to figure out what you want to do there because you need to find something offensively because that's where they really struggled so far this year.
Yeah, I mean, they're really, having trouble getting the ball in the end zone and turnovers. This game, the score kind of surprised me a little bit. I think Shady has a good team, but, you're talking about the second week in a row, they had to go to Roane County, a very good team. Then you travel to James Monroe again, another very good team, a tough place to win. You're down 13-0. You don't have your starting quarterback. I mean, that's impressive to make a comeback from that. I mean, you got to give Shady a lot of credit. I know it's a AAA versus a AA, but I think a lot of people feel like maybe it's still more of an equal type game. And Shady's got to feel pretty good about that win. Gives him a little momentum now going forward. There are some games on that schedule that they can definitely win, and Greenbrier East and teams like that, it's going to give them some points. The only sad thing is that they made their schedule the right way, and the whole shifting got them into a bit of a bind because I definitely think this team can win 7 games, and 7 might not be enough to get the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. For James Monroe, I feel like it's kind of confirming our fears for them. When you lose a Cooper Ridgeway, whenever you lose a Chaz Boggs, you're losing some of your ability to move the ball down the field, and I think that's what they're really trying to do at this point. And it's kind of can't find it, even rushing wise. They're right. Still struggling to get it.
And two-way guys. I mean, they were big on offense, but they were big on defense too.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of take a double hit there, and unfortunately that's single A, double A type football in our area. And they're in a bind now too. They're really going to have to find some wins, and you look down that schedule, and they're going to find some teams that are desperate for wins too. Some good teams and teams that they're not going to be able to manhandle. They'll have to start playing clean football, or they're going to be in trouble.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of starts this week because they'll have Pikeview, and that's an opportunity. Pikeview's struggling a little bit to get on the board and get some wins, and maybe try to figure out what you want to do and what you're going to be successful at on offense. Because again, that's kind of where it starts. James Monroe always has a good stout defense. I kind of took that away, shut Shady out for a half, and if you don't have 3 interceptions, you're giving like 3 possessions there. You might come away with the win. So I think that they've got to figure something out offensively.
Yeah, they definitely go on a run. But I've got Greenbrier West I know is on the schedule going forward, and Bluefield's on the schedule going forward. So those are teams that like Bluefield may be struggling a little bit right now, but when you get back on the AA scene, Bluefield's going to be pretty good.
That's the final game of the season, so you could be getting to 2 teams that are playing
for a shot.
Trying to get into AA. Yep. So last game for week 2, I really want to hit on Summers County, Greenbrier West. We just talked about Greenbrier West. We were both kind of parsing over the stat sheet that we got, and it was a little bit odd. Summers County, I think, ran 70 plays in this game.
Yeah. It was crazy. I think it was like 30. It was double, roughly right at double the plays.
Yeah.
So it was like 38-63 or something like that. It's one of those you look at it and 27-0. You look at the plays and you're like, this don't add up. I mean, that's weird, So yeah, I mean, the stat sheet is so bizarre. There's some good things on there from both sides. Tyson Atkins has another big game for Summers County. Evan Vandal did a good job for West with 3 touchdowns, running and passing. Isaac Agee with a punt return for a touchdown. That dude's electric as could be. But there was like 18 first downs in the game or something. It was just really
I think it was 12 for Greenbrier West and 8 for Summers County. Yeah. To me, the way it read is that Summers was able to move the ball. They just weren't able to get into the end zone. And Greenbrier West had a good passing attack. They hit a couple passing touchdowns there, and I think that's where they got them. And Summers County just isn't equipped at this point to be able to throw the ball. We talked about it. Right. Quarterback situation, they're starting somebody new there. Personnel-wise, they're probably not the Ryan Oliveros, who was going to be the starting quarterback, was the first-team All-State receiver last year. He quit. Damian Foolin was probably about 300-400 yard receiver last year to complement Oliveros as a freshman. He's not playing. So they really, passing-wise, they don't really have the personnel to move the ball that way, which makes them a little bit predictable. But that was kind of my takeaway from this is I was a little bit impressed with Summers, just yardage totals and all that, being able to move the ball up and down the field. And Greenbrier West still has a bit of an injury situation that they're trying to navigate through.
Yeah, and it's like we were talking earlier. When a team knows basically what you're going to do, and you still can kind of get it done, that is pretty impressive. But we've always talked. Between the 20s is one thing.
Mm-hmm.
You get inside the 20, it's totally different, and the field shrinks on you a little bit and stuff. So, I mean, it was. I don't know if you can ever take a lot of good out of a 27-0 loss, but it did feel like that maybe they were kind of right in that game a little bit, and going forward it's still going to be tough though because they just have such a crazy schedule for a Class A team. I mean, when you look at it, Greenbrier East is on that schedule, and
they've got Shady this week.
Those are both AAA schools, so which kind of helps them in a way, but it's going to be a tall task, especially being one-dimensional against a team, especially like Shady, has already shown that they have quality defense. So I don't know, it's gonna be hard, but Tyson Atkins is a real deal.
So what are some of your top takeaways from week 2?
Just kind of the defenses again. I mean, we're so used to lately, the last few years of seeing teams so explosive on offense, and maybe outside of Princeton, that's not it's not the case right now. You see a lot of teams relying on defense, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, I like, I don't like shootouts. I'm not much of a fan of those kind of games.
Stops the clock.
Yeah, but I mean, I was just, I was surprised, that Beckley manhandled Greenbrier East the way they did. That was a little bit of a surprise, but that just kind of rubber stamped the fact that Beckley is pretty legit, and I think they showed that, even though Greenbrier East was probably outweighed a little bit in the trenches, but sometimes that speed will beat size. Well, Beckley's got the size and the speed, so I think that was pretty impressive. But just the defenses, I mean, their defenses are really playing well. Independence pitches a shutout. Greenbrier West pitches a shutout. Woodrow pitches a shutout. Shady does a really good job, with their defense. So, going forward, if the defenses can keep going, I think that's, we've all said it, that wins championships.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I think that I'm taking away, there's a lot of receiver talent in the area.
Yep.
Tristan Klein from Montcalm now leads the area in receiving yards, but Brad Mofficer, obviously new, really good player for Princeton coming in. He's staying steady on track. Kyler Kenyon, though, from West Side, another one. Yep. Christian Lynx Weiler from Independence. These are all guys who are putting up pretty decent receiving numbers for the first couple of weeks of the season. Yep. So I'm kind of curious to see exactly how those games are able to keep developing down the stretch.
Yeah. Because, once it gets going, eventually, you're going to have to be able to run the football. Mm-hmm. And we do have some teams that can run the football, but you're going to, passing is going to be tough as the weather gets a little rougher going down the stretch. So, but yeah, I mean, the receivers are great right now, and that's really fun to watch.
Yeah, go ahead, and we're going to move on to week 3 and kind of look ahead. Really kind of a couple key matchups with this one. 2 big ones. You'll be at Oak Hill, Princeton, which will be at Oak Hill, and I will be at Independence, Nicholas County, which is at Nicholas County. Let me go ahead and start off with your game. You saw Oak Hill week 1. I've seen Princeton the last 2 weeks. This one, there's going to be a lot of eyes on this. It's a rematch of last year's first round playoff game. I think Princeton won that 34-7 or 35-7 or so. Devon Marion and Keith Taylor, they coached together on Princeton staff. They both got head coaching jobs at different places last year, and it was competitive. We were talking about it a little bit. I think Marion was actually the only coach that was able to hold Kennedy Award winner Don Collins under 100 yards receiving. Did it last year whenever the 2 teams played very effectively. The one thing they were unable to do was keep Markel Lowe in check. Right. I think he had well over 200 yards from scrimmage. He had a 70-yard, on 3rd and 10, took a 70-yard swing pass for a touchdown, had over 130 yards rushing. Really kind of did his thing. He's on pace again this year, over 200 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns. And for Oak Hill, one thing that is kind of stood out, has been a little bit concerning for me, is that they have turned the ball over, a couple of interceptions, played some close games, and we talked about it. Princeton obviously has the penalty issue. Who's going to kind of get out of their way first?
Yeah, I think this one might boil down to just Princeton has probably the better personnel, and that's, just in the fact that Oak Hill had so many pieces to replace. Even though that defense has done really well to first get 2 games of the year, they're really going to be put under pressure in this game. And, I thought even in the Nicholas County game, I thought maybe that, Nicholas was kind of effective in the run game. Well, now you're bringing in Markel Lowe and these guys, so they're going to be really effective in the run game. And, you still have the top-notch passing game to go with it. I just think there's too many weapons there, for Oak Hill to defend. And, I think they're going to have trouble blocking Princeton up front. We'll see how that plays out. But, they're definitely going to put them under pressure all night. And because I thought, Nicholas County had them under pressure a little bit too, had Oak Hill under pressure as far as the defense went. And, really that night, there was nothing bad to say really about the Oak Hill the Nicholas County defense. I thought they played really well. A couple of big plays they got hit for, but that's going to be hard to hit against Princeton. So we'll see how it plays out. On paper, I just think it's going to be, a Princeton's game, and we'll see.
Yeah, and see, that's really what I'm curious about. I kind of think Oak Hill might take the approach here to, Devon knows what he's dealing with. He coached those kids 2 years ago. He's been on that roster. He knows how good they are. I wouldn't be surprised to see them lean on J.D. Moritz a lot to try to shorten this game and make Princeton try to commit to stopping the run a little bit. That's one thing. Again, I thought Capital had a little bit of success with was running. They have a dynamic running back. Bluefield is able to get a couple chunks. Most of their running yardage came off of one chunk play, the 73-yard touchdown run. But I think that's probably where Oak Hill's going to try to lean, is try to get things to the ground. Because you mentioned it, I don't know that they're going to have a ton of time to drop back and pass with Kaiser and Jennings coming off the edge. And if they decide to blitz on the other guys, it makes things difficult. So that's kind of where I'm leaning. But if somebody's going to be able to come up with a game plan to slow them down, it's probably going to be Marion.
That's exactly right. And that if they can run the ball effectively, then that will slow that pass rush down a little bit, and that's a big key. But if they can't, then it could get really ugly.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the piece that I wrote in the Deep Post about those teams all making statements. This is probably Princeton's chance to make another statement. If you're looking at that, you look around, okay, Oak Hill was a playoff team last year, they're 2-0, kind of a jackpot of points.
Yeah.
This is our chance to really kind of rub it in and
that's kind of a two-way street too.
Yeah.
If Oak Hill can, kind of hold their own and maybe pull off a shocker, then that's definitely going to be a huge statement for them.
That's a great point. That flips things all the other way. Like Oak Hill's like, hey, like we're in this. Yeah. I wrote about. I think that a dark horse still in AAA is Herbert Hoover.
Right.
I think that they're still a league below these other 4 teams.
Right.
But they're still pretty good, and Oak Hill probably sees something like that. And they're like, all right, local guy thinks that we're on the race, and this is their opportunity. They will really belong in that top tier.
But teams. I think Devon will do a good job of that too. Kind of playing that card of nobody's respecting us and that kind of thing, and that does sell well. And it is their chance to kind of make a big statement. So they'll be ready. There's no doubt about that. I just think right now, and you have these. Year to year, sometimes you lose enough kids to where it makes it hard, the matchup a little harder, and I think that's the situation they're in right now. But I definitely believe they'll come to play. They'll be ready to play.
Absolutely. It is worth noting that 2 years ago, I kind of thought Princeton would run over them, and then went to a triple overtime game that you had back in Oak Hill.
That's right. Yeah, that's it.
On the turf this time around. A game so I'll have 2 games this week actually. Greenbrier East at Bluefield, the Thursday night game. That's the good thing about Bluefield splitting the stadium with Graham is you get an occasional. We talked about the James Monroe Bluefield game at the end of the year. That's going to be a Thursday game.
Right.
We get a couple of these odd Thursday and Saturday games from Bluefield. Man, I think Bluefield needs this one bad. They need something. They need something to go right with them. I've talked to some different coaches throughout the area, and body language just doesn't look good when you watch them. They need something to boost their confidence. And again, I don't know what their injury situation is going to be like. Again, they're on a short week this week, and you're already thin at the skill position. You're already young. You're trying to get some other kids to step in there. It's tough, and obviously if you're Greenbrier East and you want to stay in that AAA playoff race that we've talked about that's so difficult, you can't lose to a AA team.
Right.
This game last year, I think, was started on a Friday and finished on a Tuesday because of the lightning delay. Hamrick threw, I think, 2 or 3 interceptions in that game. For me, I think it has to be now for Bluefield. You've got to at least look competitive in this game, and their schedule's difficult, so you need some sort of bump. If you can get a win against the AAA, it's probably going to get some points. I'd expect Greenbrier East to be at least probably a 5-5 team at worst. Maybe even a couple more wins. I think you've really got to have this if you're Bluefield.
Yeah, they're going to be in kind of desperation mode for sure. But, actually both of them are in desperation mode a little bit. I mean, it's kind of hard to say that in the third week of the season. But, Bluefield, like you say, needs something positive. And Greenbrier East doesn't need something really negative again, because I know they're kind of stinging from this loss to Beckley. I think, ultimately they maybe kind of expected that a little bit, with Beckley having such a big line and owning the trenches like that. We'll see if they can bounce back. I mean, because they definitely have the weapons. I mean, the May kid's really good tailback. He just got smothered every time he tried to run the football. If they can get a gap for him, he's dangerous in the open field. And we know, Brody can really throw it. He can sling it. He made a couple good passes against Beckley, running for his life, and was able to find targets. So I don't know. It's a hard game to predict, hard game to kind of get a feel on how it's going to go. I wasn't sure just how good the win was against Riverside, and the comeback win. I mean, it's exciting, but when you kind of analyze it, you're like, maybe you should have handled it too. Yeah, maybe you should have handled Riverside a little better. So I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a fun game to watch because there is such a desperation factor there. But I think maybe the key might be, with both teams in the situation they are, is who can throw the first punch. Who can really hit hard. Because if Greenbrier East can come out and score a couple times, who knows what the situation is going to be at Bluefield. But if Bluefield comes out and scores and gets that confidence and starts believing, then it could be the other way around.
And see, that's the thing. If you're Greenbrier East, I think you have to get up early because Bluefield just does not have the offense at this point. I think that passing yards wise, I don't think they have it for 10 yards passing on the season. They starting a freshman quarterback. We talked about it. It's the first time in program history that they've ever done that. Yeah. And then you talk about the skill players. Jeff King, I think, is the most experienced one, and he didn't play on Friday. You got all these other kids that are carrying the load for the most part, and they're not playing. Yeah. So I think that's what it's going to come down to. If you're Greenbrier East and you get a lead early, you probably feel good about yourself. If you're Bluefield, you've got to find a way to score early and let your defense play. I don't think that healthy defensively they're as bad as Princeton made them look.
Right. Princeton is so good up there and so lethal that, if you get down, they can make you look bad, real bad.
Absolutely. The other game I've got, Independence-Nicholas County. This feels like, that late October Sunday night football matchup between, the Packers and the 49ers or something like that. Like, it's like, this is like a really intriguing, matchup. And, a lot of kind of bragging rights here on the line and some playoff implications, too. Right. Nicholas County moved to 1-1 last week with a 20-7 win at Chapmanville. Devin Nash had a really good all-purpose game as a runner and a receiver. And Independence, they go on the road. They've not played a normal game yet. Lightning delay on Friday again. I don't think it kicked off till 8:30. So then you have a 4-hour ride back once you get there.
Played the downpour pretty much.
Yeah, to me, that was probably a really good showing. 20-0. A lot of people are going to look at that and know that Brooks been down in AAA for a little bit now.
Right.
But to go on the road and with a young team under those sort of circumstances, to me, we talk about offense being so key, and it is. But they won this game on special teams and with defense. Micah Cuthbert, 2 field goals, 2 PATs. That's 8 points right there. Yeah, and that sort of stuff matters. Yep. So they're able to do that. Miles Greenway, I think, had a sack and a half. It just kind of proves that football is a three-phase sport, and Independence did all those things well. Right. And it's going to be interesting. This probably could be the most competitive matchup between the two teams in a while. Right. Both have been playoff fixtures. I think it should be a really good one. We usually get it later. I think usually in October or late October. So to get it early is kind of a treat.
We look at Nicholas County. I thought the win at Chapmanville was huge. I really did. Chapmanville's a good football team. I thought they were going to kind of go into a buzzsaw down there. I thought it'd be a tough place to win. and they handled that game, without too much trouble. So that's big. And, when you start dissecting the Oak Hill game, you just look at a couple things that happened in there. It's like, if these two things don't happen or this doesn't happen, then, Nicholas County has a really good shot at winning that game. And one thing we have noticed about them, especially last year, especially with Colton Helms at quarterback, I mean, he gets better as the year goes along. And, he had a rough night the first night. He was kind of running for his life a little bit, but he's kind of settled down. The Nash kids settled in good, and they have a defense. They only held Chattanooga only scored 6 against them, and they really kind of held Oak Hill in check pretty good. You had the one block kick for a touchdown, but they hit a couple big plays on them, and that's the difference in the game. Really, I mean, they were right there with Oak Hill. So this one could be real interesting. This is the 3rd week in a row now that Independence is on the road, and even against college teams and pro teams, that wears on you after a while. Most of the time, you don't see that very often. And, it's not 3 games in a row against a bunch of chumps either. I mean, they played 3 tough games, late games, so it's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back. I think you got a dandy. I really think it's going to be a good one.
Absolutely. It should be fun, and honestly, it's a good change of pace for me. I thought about taking Oak Hill at Princeton. I was like, I've seen Princeton twice already, and I'll see them down the road too. So probably a good little change of pace too. And, I'm based more out of Mercer County. You're in Beckley area, so you probably see Independence quite a bit as well. So good little early change of pace. 2 other games we kind of hit on already: Parkersburg South, Beckley, West Side Man. For me, this is kind of a prove-it game for Beckley to me. We talked about it. They started 5-1 the last couple of years. I want to see what you do against Parkersburg South. Now, I don't know how good Parkersburg South is. I can't imagine they're as good as what they were the last 2 years with the players that they lost. They've lost some really good players. Right. But still, I think this is your chance to not make just an area impression, but also make a statewide impression. Parkersburg South, I think they come in at 1-1. They're another Quad A team. They
carry a name.
Yeah, absolutely. When you beat them, people look at the schedule and they're like, oh, that's Beckley would be pretty good. And then Beckley, if they're looking for a home playoff game, I think this is a really big win that they should probably get.
Right. I think it's a must.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
I think Parkersburg South is good, but they beat University last week. University lost a ton in graduation, so I don't think this is a typical University team. They were able to put up a bunch of points on them, but I don't know how much you can take out of that game. It's kind of a proving ground for them too. Can they score on Beckley? As good as Beckley's defense has been. So, if Beckley's defense rises to the occasion, plays like it can, and they can run the football. The times I watched them play Parkersburg South, they've done okay against them. They've just shot themselves in the foot so many times.
I think 2 years ago, it was like a Saturday game, wasn't it? The year that Parkersburg South went to the state
title game. They were really good. Parkersburg South loaded,
And it's like a fumble or so. I think in the first quarter, they were down 28-0, and a couple of them came off turnovers.
Yeah, they just turned it right over. So, Beckley's done a good job of, holding that in check this year. So, if they can take care of the football and play their defense like they, have been playing, I definitely feel like this is their game to win. I think it's their game to lose, I guess is the right way to say it. They definitely I feel like are better than Parkersburg South, but again, got to prove it.
Yeah, and again, last game, West Side Man. This is the one for me that I'm kind of looking at. We talked about the emotional letdown. Don't let that happen because to me, you should be the favorite in the rest of your games, except for probably Independence, Tug Valley. We're going to see how that sort of progresses a little bit. That's obviously a very good single A team. But if you handle business as you're supposed to, you're looking at a home playoff game, and this is part of handling business. And man isn't a slouch. They always a really good competitive program. They beat Mountain View, I think, 35-0. So for me, I think this is a test for West Side. How can you bounce back emotionally? Can you keep it on track? And can you realize, hey, we're not just playing for this week, we're also playing for hosting that second week in November.
Have a lot bigger goals ahead, and this is a key step in that direction. And, we've always joked over the years, when you go down to man, nobody's going to do you a bunch of favors. Just put it nicely. So you better play, and you better be clean, and you better do your job. So, they're going to have a lot of things going against them. The emotional thing is a big key. If they can get going early, not make some silly mistakes early, and let man kind of get the momentum on them early. I think Midwest ought to be okay. They have a really good chance. Of course, we talked about the Tug Valley game, which I think is going to be another tougher game than people may think it's going to be. But they have a very good chance of being undefeated going all the way into the Independence game, which would be really huge. Another kind of statement type game probably for both teams at that point. So, it all boils down to when you haven't won a lot over the years is how do you handle prosperity, and if they can handle their business and do what they're supposed to. Yeah, they may be looking at a home playoff game for sure.
Yeah, I think handling prosperity is that's a great way to put it. It's a great point. For me, I want to see kind of as we head down for the 2 weeks of the season, can Midland Trail kind of rebound? That's one I'm thinking about. They're now 0-2 at this point, losses to Poca, and they just really struggled with turnovers. Clay County and Poca, I think I was looking at, they've thrown 4 interceptions. It just are struggling to find anything on offense. And you talked about the preseason, it was going to rely a lot on the offensive line, but that's kind of one we haven't talked a ton about. That's one team that I want to see if they can turn it around.
Yeah, it's been a tough go. Just not this year, but in the last few years. With turnovers and toughness and things like that, and they really felt like they had the toughness factor. Back at Midland Trail, that was always their calling card. When they were really good those years. And were making playoff runs, but they're in kind of desperation mode too. I mean, it's getting a little bit down to cases because, I really thought, we always talk about mulligans and golf and stuff like that. I really thought they burned a mulligan against Clay County because I really felt like they could have won that game, and it just didn't play out their way. Once we saw how good Poca was, going to Poca was going to be a tough game, even though they played well as far as keeping the score close, but. They've got some brutal games coming up. They still have Wheeling Central on the schedule. They still got Greenbrier West on the schedule. It's not. I think they play. Don't they play James Monroe? I believe.
I do believe so. Yeah.
So those are not games that it's Midland Trail. You could look at and say they can't win them, but they're going to be tough games to win. They're kind of getting themselves into a stretch where you're in a little bit of trouble in regards to the playoffs, and you're going to start winning. And it's going to see how they can rebound, and that probably needs to start this week.
Absolutely. Kind of hitting on the volleyball and soccer slate a little bit. There's a lot. Tomorrow, the big one that stands out on the volleyball side is Wyoming East and James Monroe reviewing the tri-match. And soccer this week, there's Beckley, Charleston Catholic, and then Thursday, Princeton, Beckley, which you've kind of been high and impressed with Princeton so far. But I want to start with volleyball because for Wyoming East, that's a program that in the old 3-class system, they've been chasing, they've never been to a state tournament. They felt optimistic about this group the last 2 years. The issue is they ran into the buzzsaw with Shady Spring and Herbert Hoover being in the same region as you. And now, James Monroe, I think they came in ranked 4th in the coaches poll in Class AA, and I think that's well merited. Really good program. That they've been really good. They were really good last year.
Right.
For Wyoming East, I think this is your chance to really make your mark, and this is your first big challenge of the season, I think, in that regards.
Yeah, I think that this is when you look at the schedule, there's not a ton of matches on there that you're like, oh wow, that's going to be tough. But this is one of those that's going to be really tough. And James Monroe is coming off played in the Philip Barber tournament. They really stepped up. As far as their competition goes. And, when they played at the Philip Barber tournament this weekend, there was Philip Barber and Glenn there who were the AA championship game last year, brought back a bunch of players from that team, and there was Ritchie County. That was the only 4 AA teams in that tournament. There was like 7 quad A teams and 6 AAA teams, including, teams like Cabell Midland, Shady, big name teams when you start rolling down the line. And James Monroe qualified for the silver bracket. They actually went through that and won that, beating Shady in the final. So that's a big boost for them. That's kind of one of those things where they played single A for the longest time. Now they're up to double A, but they really, as I like to say it, they kind of jumped in the deep end of the pool and said, okay, let's see what we can do. And I think they got a lot of confidence out of that. So now they're coming down to Wyoming East Tuesday night. And, how will they respond? Are they going to be able to handle that kind of, prosperity? And can they keep it rolling like they have been? Because they have some absolutely dynamic weapons. And, they're a lot of fun to watch. And, Wyoming East is kind of on the other side of the region, and they're probably considered the team to beat over there. There's, they're over there with Liberty. James Monroe is, the team to beat on their side. So if both of them win, they don't meet because of the new regional format. They'll both go to Charleston. But if one of them trips up, then they're liable to meet again in the second or in the regional. So that could be tricky. But I think Wyoming East, it'll be kind of telling where they are. Because like you say, they played Hoover and Shady, and I thought they played Hoover well in the region the last couple of years. It's just that they couldn't quite get over the hump. This will kind of be a game where they are a match where they can kind of get their bearings a little bit, and then there's Riverview in there, who we feel like Riverview now in Class A is a team that can go to state tournaments. And they got a pile of seniors, so that's another good team. So it's a really good match all the way around. I feel like that it's a tall task still right now for Wyoming East, but you don't get better until you play better teams, and this will kind of give them a gauge on where they're at.
Absolutely. And on the soccer side, we talked about last week the Beckley Oak Hill match kind of being a big one because of sectional implications, and Beckley kind of went in there and had their way from the jump. And this is the thing we always talk about with Beckley. Beckley's probably a top 5 AAA team, usually program state in, state out, top top 7 at least.
Yep.
The issue they always run into is you play in the same region as GW, or one year you play the same region as Greenbrier East, which won a state championship. So it's been a very strong region. Only one team goes to the state tournament. But this week you get Charleston Catholic, who, regardless of being single A, they're still considered one of the best programs, regardless of class, in the state. And then you get Princeton, who is a team on the rise. You were pretty impressed by how they ended last year and how they started this year. And you saw them play to a draw with Shady Spring in a game that kind of came away thinking that Princeton probably could have won this game, probably should have won that game.
Princeton's really good. I mean, when I saw them last year in the regular season against Beckley, of course, Beckley won that game, but you really could tell there was a difference, in that team. But Princeton had struggled for a couple of years, and the new coach they have there, he was confident that he would have the team ready by the postseason, and he'd only had them for just a little while when they played Beckley. They go into the postseason, and they had lost pretty badly to Greenbrier East earlier in the year. They beat Greenbrier East in the opening round of the sectional, gave Beckley all they wanted in the sectional final. And they just kind of built on that a little bit, they really played a little bit, I thought, out of character against Shady. They played really well for about 15, 20 minutes, and then they just kind of let the game get to them. They kind of lost their head a little bit, wound up getting a couple of red cards, and, just really played very undisciplined, which, coach was very disappointed with. And but then they turn around and then they beat St. Albans over the weekend 5-0. So Princeton's really good, and anytime that Princeton and Beckley get together, it's going to be a heated match. Princeton likes to play physical; they don't hide it. They're going to play physical. They're going to bump you around a little bit. I think Beckley's geared for that now. Where in the past, maybe the kids were younger, very talented, but younger and a little bit smaller. They're much stronger now. They're kind of up for that. I think it's going to be an incredible match, and then, like you say, that comes after the Charleston Catholic match. Charleston Catholic tied Princeton 1-1. They beat Shady 2-1. So Charleston Catholic again has another very good team. So they're going to kind of get see where they stand with them against Beckley. Next week this coming week is huge. With Beckley having beat Oak Hill, if they can beat Princeton, that's going to kind of give them that leg up going towards Greenbrier East, as far as possibly winning the home field advantage for the sectional, which, of course, sometimes we really wonder how much that really helps in that section, which has been wacky, the last 4 or 5 years to say the least. But, fun to watch, very unpredictable. But, any time you get the chance, you want to play on your home field. That's your best shot, to keep moving forward.
Absolutely. Going to wrap things up with our Player of the Week winners. Going to go ahead and announce those right now. The Week 1 Player of the Week for the southern part of the state is Chance Barker, quarterback from Princeton, and the Kanawha Valley Player of the Week winner is Noah Velathombi from Hurricane, quarterback, led the win over Spring Valley. The way we went with this, we talked about it last week.
Yep.
We don't always agree, and this is where the poll came into play here. I went with Barker with my vote, and you went with Caden Sims from Meadow Bridge. Both are really good picks.
Yep.
Barker had over 300 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. Sims had over 300 yards rushing in what was his official season debut for Meadowbridge, which is now 2-0 after they picked up a forfeit win week 1.
Right.
I don't think that there really was any wrong answer here, but this kind of goes to show that the poll does matter because the poll was a tiebreaker, and Barker ended up getting the most votes and winning. So he also gets the community choice there too because he was the top overall vote getter.
Yeah.
And then for the Kanawha Valley Community Choice goes to Blake Fisher, who will move on for the $500 scholarship, which I also think watching Fisher, he's going to be a player of the week as well. That kid, he's really good. He's just a weapon. He reminds me a little bit of a bigger Judah Price in a sense. He moves really well. I was watching that when they played Independence. He's a weapon. He makes him a little more dynamic. But, yeah, absolutely. I think that we ended up with 2 really good player of the week winners.
No doubt. Man, Hurricane can put some points on the board.
Mm-hmm.
And put some points on the board. So they're crazy. But, I don't know about their defense. Sometimes their defense, we'll have to work that part out. But, yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it's like I was hedging on both of those kids, as far as our Southern West Virginia winner. When you put up those kind of numbers as quarterback, that's incredibly impressive, especially against a rival in a game like that. And, like you said with Caden, 300 yards is 300 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And, when he, first played the game, I'm pretty sure it was a 60-yard touchdown run. Then he had an 89-yard touchdown run and another run later in the game. So, I kind of chuckled when I saw those because, when I talked to him before the season, we talked about, his ability to run and stuff. And, he said he wasn't really a really agile kind of runner. He just took it and went straight to the house. And I could just imagine that locomotive just firing down through there, and Friday night. So, great game for them. And, like I say, it was no wrong answers.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Princeton, even picking their candidate was pretty difficult because you look at Brad Monster, he had a highlight just catch, and he did all the work. He reversed his field, goes for the touchdown, and Mark Loeb again, 100-plus yards and 3 touchdowns. And he had over 200 yards from scrimmage. So it's tough, but now Barker's off the board. You can kind of focus on those other 2 for nominations moving forward.
It's kind of crazy, because it really wasn't that long ago when, you didn't really consider Princeton, a football power. And, the way that program's turned around and the support is just incredible. I give a lot of support credit to the Beckley fans. That side was packed, on their side. So, when there's excitement's there, you do get some good following, but, kudos to them, if the votes mattered and they jump behind their kid. Absolutely.
So anytime that you worry about the votes, I promise you this is the instance. It's been explained to you.
And it won't be the last. It won't be the last.
Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
No, I just like the way the season's gone so far this year. The last couple of years, I got to admit, it was not really exciting. There was so much lopsided stuff, and games each week where it was hard to find good games, and now you're trying to narrow down games because they're like, man, this game's good, this game's good. It'd be one of those years that you wish you could split in half, go cover about 4 or 5 games because there's a lot of good ones out there, and that's what I like. I just like to watch good football.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned that week 1, we couldn't staff Billings Central James and Rowe, or week 2 we couldn't do West Side Mingo, which would have loved to have been able to do that one. And it's tough. You look at some of these games this week. It's Beckley.
And we appreciate everybody that's sending us stuff too after the games. That helps a lot. We want to get these kids as much exposure as possible, and there's only 2 of us. We go where we try to make the best decisions and go where the best games are. But we really appreciate scorekeepers and coaches sending us stuff. That helps immensely.
Absolutely. And once again, thank you to our sponsors. The sponsor player of the week, Northside Automotive Group, Law Offices of Brandon Steele, and then of course Little General did a great job with this. But once again, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next week.